since we've last talked, but today I'm going to teach you a little bit about nationalism and why I consider it my credo of sorts. On the right, there are a lot of people who pose as nationalists who clearly misunderstand the term. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they just misunderstand it when they call themselves nationalists. And I believe it is very important to know, it's vital to know the difference between someone who really is a nationalist and who isn't. In the most reductive sense, nationalism is the desire to preserve your nation. This only makes sense because how can you have nationalism without a nation? The word nation, the Latin root of the word is natio, which literally means people, race. It is a people of common history, common birth, common race, common culture, common language. These are the things that make up a nation. I believe it is very important that I tell you what the difference between a nation and a state are, because people often use them in place of another, and they are not the same thing. The state is a sovereign governing body over a defined territory with defined borders. That is a state. The United States is a state. France is a state. Canada is a state. Algeria is a state. I think you get the point. There are three major types of relationships between a nation and a state. First, you have a multinational state, which is a state that encompasses more than one nation, more than one peoples. That would be like the United States. Here it is one state, but we have many nations of people living within our state. France, Canada has many nations of people within its state. So that is what a multinational state is. Next, you have a stateless nation, which would be a nation of people who don't have a state of their own. That would be like the Palestinians, and until the middle of the 20th century, the Jews. Now, the third important relationship to know is a nation state. And a nation state is a state that encompasses only one nation of people. That would be like Japan, where most of the people in Japan are Japanese, or Iceland, or even Poland. Does that sound familiar to you? A state that encompasses just one nation? That's right, ethnostate. That is the word that people like to throw around here. Ethnostate, which is really just a nation state, a state for one nation of people. So ethno-nationalism is a redundant term because the nation and nationalism has everything to do with the identity of the people, which includes race and ethnicity. Common birth is a big part of the nation, as well as culture, language, other things like that, which can be adopted, but you can't have one or two and not the other. If you're not of common birth, you can never be a part of that nation. The civic nationalist, or faux nationalist, I might go back and forth between those terms, is not concerned with preserving race, ethnicity, culture. They are mostly concerned with preserving shared ideals.
I don't care if the United States is 80% brown in 30 years, as long as they're pro-gun, pro-family, want to go to the stars, want to have freedom, and don't want to be slaves. And we need to get past what color we are and adopt a system of ideas.
They believe that through shared ideals, they can preserve the way of life they love so much without the nation that built it. My question is, what is more natural or basic a drive than to simply exist? Survival. Civic nationalism is so unnatural, and what Alex has just said, sorry about mixing up the words there, what Alex has just said is extremely unnatural because he does not wish to survive for his nation to survive. That is not a chip within his brain for his nation to survive. He doesn't care. He believes that as long as other nations that enter his state believe in the same things as he does, then his nation may dissipate, disappear, and he does not care for that. I wouldn't say that is actively suicidal because he does not wish for his race or his nation to, as far as I know, for them to disappear, or he's not actively trying to do that as far as I know, but it is sort of a passive suicidalness. Demographics is not an issue. Demographics is not a concern for a civic nationalist. As long as the people coming here claim to share a certain ideal, love for the Constitution maybe, then they are welcome. Not only is civic nationalism not nationalism because they do not wish to necessarily preserve the nation, it is actually an opposing force to nationalism, much like fire and ice, except it is paper versus blood. Paper being the belief of the civic nationalist and blood of the nationalist. Now, the civic nationalist may say that an African man with English documents that was maybe born there, English legal documents, is an Englishman, and that's why I use the term paper. If they have the legal documents, they are an Englishman. Now, the nationalists, such as myself, would say an African man could never be an Englishman, ever. It doesn't matter if he has legal documents. Sure, he's a legal member of the state. Remember, state versus nation. The African man may be a member of the state. I recognize that. He's a legal citizen of that country. But he can never be a part of the nation, the people. That is inherited at birth. Just as if I were to go to China for a few years and maybe I gain Chinese citizenship and I have my Chinese legal documents, I will never be Chinese. China is usually an easier one for people to understand because China is having none of this multi-ethnic society. They are very homogenous, and they understand, you understand, that I will never be Chinese. Sure, I might be a member of the state of China, but I'll never be Chinese, unfortunately. If they want to remain consistent, the civic nationalist must say that I am just as Chinese as a Chinese person, part of the Chinese nation. I am just as Chinese as they are, and the black man is just as English as any other Englishman, if they wish to remain consistent, right? Well, if I were to be just as Chinese and he were to be just as English as either nation, then that would mean that identity does not exist. In-group preference does not exist. Heritable traits do not exist. They cannot exist if I am to be just as Chinese and he is to be just as English. Now, ask anybody on the street if a black man should feel guilty for colonialism in Africa, and they will say no. You know what? Go do that and let me know if you find somebody who says yes, because at least they're consistent. At least they are a consistent faux nationalist, right? Because they're saying that paper is stronger than blood, that black man is an Englishman, and therefore he should feel just as guilty as any other Englishman. At least they're consistent, right? I disagree, but... And why don't people believe that? Why don't they believe the black man should be guilty for colonialism? Well, it's because he's not a part of the English nation. He's not related to that nation by common birth and descent, which is a very important part. Ethnically, racially, he does not belong. If you are a nationalist like myself, you are nothing like the civic kind. I actually want German to remain German. I know, well, Germany to remain German, that is. I know it's so, it's very controversial to say so. I want Japan to remain Japanese. Oh my gosh, what am I saying? What, do I want people to start attacking me now as a racist? It's like they haven't been already. But the civic nationalist does not agree. They don't agree that Japan should remain Japanese or that Germany should remain German. It's just not a concern of their own. You know, as long as the Somalians heading into Sweden love Swedish culture, I really don't have a problem with it. Now, the simple way to determine whether or not someone is a nationalist or a faux nationalist is you ask them, are you concerned with preserving the ethnicity or race of your nation, of your people? And that's it. If they are, they might be a nationalist. It's all about love. We love our people. I love my people. You should love your people. That's what it's all about.